The information provided in this video is strictly for educational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute professional business, marketing, financial, or legal advice. Strategies regarding social media, content creation, brand building, and corporate marketing involve inherent risks, and past performance or historical trends do not dictate future results. Potential outcomes discussed in this video are based on case studies and industry observations, not absolute certainties. Viewers must conduct their own extensive due diligence and consult with certified professionals before implementing any business strategies, allocating marketing budgets, or making operational changes. The digital landscape is highly volatile, and brand reputation or financial standing can be significantly impacted by algorithmic shifts and market dynamics. Proceed at your own discretion. If you are running an American brand today, and you are still relying on a content calendar filled with generic product shots, holiday greeting posts, and highly polished corporate updates, you are actively burning your marketing budget. In fact, you are likely already obsolete in the minds of your core demographic. We are witnessing the absolute collapse of the traditional social media marketing playbook. Over the last 3 to 4 years, the entire architecture of digital attention has experienced a seismic shift, moving entirely from the social graph to the interest graph. This means that nobody on these platforms cares who you are, how long you have been in business, or how big your advertising budget is, unless you are relentlessly entertaining, deeply relatable, or profoundly useful in the first 3 seconds of a video. Let me share a reality that should keep every chief marketing officer in the United States awake at night. According to historical trends and recent industry analyses, organic reach for standard, static brand posts on legacy platforms has plummeted to near zero. If you have a legacy account with 100,000 followers, the current algorithmic reality dictates that only a minuscule fraction of those followers will organically see your post in their feed, and an even smaller fraction will actually engage with it. The days of building an audience once and monetizing them indefinitely without continuous high-level effort are completely over. We have entered the era of the algorithmic lottery, where every single piece of content has to fight for its life against millions of highly optimized, algorithmically favored videos from independent creators who understand human psychology vastly better than most corporate marketing departments. Think about the brands that have completely dominated the cultural conversation in recent history. They did not achieve cultural penetration by posting sanitized press releases or highly manicured aesthetic photos. They achieved it by embracing chaos, leaning heavily into internet subcultures, and completely abandoning the traditional corporate voice. There is a massive unspoken divide right now in American business. On one side, you have legacy corporations spending millions of dollars on traditional advertising agencies to produce content that gets zero organic traction because it immediately triggers the consumer's internal advertisement filter. On the other side, you have agile, digitally native brands run by small, culturally tapped-in teams who are capturing billions of organic impressions simply by understanding how the modern American consumer actually consumes media. The cost of ignoring this shift is staggering and directly impacts the bottom line. It is not just about vanity metrics like likes, comments, and followers. It is about overall market share and customer acquisition costs. When your competitor captures the attention of your target demographic, they do not just win a fleeting moment of digital engagement. They win cognitive real estate. They build deep, parasocial relationships with your potential customers. They seamlessly insert themselves into the cultural zeitgeist, while your brand is relegated to the digital graveyard, completely ignored by a public that is absolutely exhausted by traditional, interruptive advertising. This masterclass is designed to completely dismantle everything you thought you knew about social media marketing and rebuild it using proven, data-backed frameworks adapted specifically for the modern digital economy. We are not going to talk about vague, unquantifiable concepts like finding your authentic voice or simply posting consistently. Those are empty buzzwords sold by consultants who do not actually know how to drive measurable, scalable business outcomes. Instead, we are going deep into the mechanical reality of algorithmic distribution, consumer psychology, and modern content architecture. By the end of this comprehensive series, you will possess a robust, actionable blueprint for an American brand content strategy that is specifically engineered to capture attention, retain it against infinite scrolling, and ultimately convert it into measurable business value and brand equity. This is the exact playbook that separates brands that are merely surviving the current digital landscape from those that are absolutely dominating their respective industries. We are going to solve the most critical structural problem facing U.S. brands today: the total inability to predictably manufacture attention in an ultra-saturated market. Right now, your internal marketing team is likely trapped in a relentless cycle of reactive content creation. You are chasing audio trends weeks after they have peaked. You are optimizing your output for specific platform features instead of actual human psychology, and you are treating social media as a secondary distribution channel for traditional marketing assets rather than a primary standalone engine for brand growth. This reactive, defensive posture is exactly why your return on investment has stagnated or declined. In this deep dive, we will replace that reactive cycle with a proactive, engineered, and highly intentional approach to content creation. You will learn how to reverse engineer the dominant content algorithms to understand exactly what behaviors they reward with viral distribution and, crucially, what specific elements they penalize with suppressed reach. We will explore detailed historical trends that showcase exactly how consumer behavior in the United States has evolved, tracking the mass migration away from aspirational, heavily produced lifestyle content toward raw, relatable, low-fidelity, and deeply niche micro-communities. Furthermore, we will dive into specific, highly detailed case studies of American brands that executed massive, profitable pivots in their organic content strategy. We will analyze the specific internal data points that precipitated these drastic changes and the structural adjustments they had to make to their marketing teams to execute them. For instance, we will examine the difficult transition from relying on high production, high-cost external creative agencies to building internal, fast-twitch content teams that can conceptualize, shoot, edit, and publish culturally relevant content within a matter of hours, not weeks. This speed of execution is no longer a luxury reserved for massive budgets. It is a fundamental, non-negotiable requirement for basic cultural relevance. You will also discover the critical foundational difference between creating content designed for audience acquisition versus creating content designed for audience retention. Most brands completely conflate the two, resulting in a muddled, ineffective strategy that accomplishes neither goal. We will map out exactly how to structure top-of-funnel content designed specifically to exploit platform algorithms and reach millions of non-followers, and how to intelligently sequence that with mid- and bottom-of-funnel content that nurtures those new viewers, builds deep brand affinity, and logically guides them toward a purchasing decision. This is not about achieving viral fame for the sake of executive vanity. This is about building a robust, highly defensible digital moat around your core business. In an era where customer acquisition costs on paid advertising platforms are skyrocketing due to data privacy changes and increased competition, a highly effective organic social media strategy is no longer just an optional marketing function. It is a core business survival mechanism. If you cannot command attention organically, your profit margins will continually be eroded by the ever-rising costs of paid media. We are going to strip away the noise and focus exclusively on what actually moves the metrics that matter. Prepare to completely rethink your approach to your brand's digital presence. The first fundamental concept we must dismantle is the reliance on follower count as an indicator of brand health. In 2026, building a massive follower base is largely a vanity metric if those followers are not actively signaling the algorithm that they want to see your content through sustained watch time and deep engagement. Let us look at a case study of a hypothetical consumer packaged goods company in the United States. Imagine if Sarah, the chief marketing officer of a national sparkling water brand, decided to allocate $3 million of her quarterly budget to an influencer campaign solely designed to drive followers to the corporate social media page. Historically, in the late 2010s, this might have yielded a positive return on investment because the social graph dictated that if someone followed you, they would likely see your next post. The platform would push the brand message to that captured audience simply because the connection existed. But we are operating in a vastly different paradigm today. The modern content algorithms operate almost exclusively on the interest graph. They do not care who Sarah managed to convince to hit the follow button yesterday. They only care about what individual users want to watch right now, in this exact millisecond. If Sarah spends millions to acquire 500,000 new followers, but her subsequent organic posts are highly produced, generic product commercials, those new followers will scroll past them within half a second. The algorithm registers this rapid abandonment as a massive negative signal. It immediately concludes that the content is completely irrelevant, and it aggressively suppresses the reach of that video, even to the people who explicitly asked to follow the brand. This is the silent killer of American corporate marketing budgets. You are not just failing to reach new audiences. You are actively teaching the algorithm to hide your content from your existing loyalists. To survive this, brands must pivot to an attention-first architecture. This means treating every single piece of content as an independent entity that must completely earn its viewership from scratch, regardless of the brand logo attached to it. Every video must function as a standalone hook, story, and payoff. Think about the historical trends of disruptive direct-to-consumer brands that launched out of nowhere over the last few years and captured massive market share. They did not do it by posting aesthetic photos of their packaging. They did it by creating content that solved a problem, exposed a fascinating manufacturing process, or leaned into the raw, unpolished reality of building a business in the United States. They understood that authenticity in 2026 does not mean looking perfect. It means looking real, vulnerable, and directly relatable to the daily friction experienced by the American consumer. Let us dive deeper into the mechanics of this attention-first architecture. The core currency of social media is no longer the like or the comment. It is average view duration and completion rate. If you can hold a viewer for 60 seconds on a 60-second video, the algorithm will reward you with explosive, exponential distribution. Imagine if John, a regional manager for a hardware retail chain, decides to start posting videos. If John posts a traditional advertisement talking about a weekend sale on power tools, historical data shows his completion rate will likely hover around 3%. Viewers recognize the ad format instantly and swipe away. However, imagine if John instead posts a fast-paced, highly detailed tutorial on how to fix a very specific, frustrating plumbing issue that plagues suburban American homes, subtly featuring the tools sold at his store without ever mentioning a price or a sale. By focusing entirely on providing extreme value and solving a visceral problem, John can achieve a 50 or 60% completion rate. The algorithm sees this massive retention and begins pushing John to millions of homeowners across the country who have recently searched for home repair content. John has just turned a regional hardware store into a nationally recognized authority, completely bypassing traditional media buying. He achieves this by deeply analyzing the audience retention graph provided by the platform analytics. When John sees a massive dip in viewership at the 4-second mark, he does not blame the algorithm. He realizes his introduction was too slow, his pacing was off, or he failed to deliver on the visual promise of the thumbnail. He adapts his next video to bridge that exact drop-off point, creating a tighter, more propulsive narrative structure that forces the viewer to keep watching. This shift requires a total restructuring of the corporate content team. The traditional approval matrix, where a single social media post must pass through a brand manager, a legal compliance officer, and a creative director over a 3-week period, is fundamentally incompatible with the speed of internet culture. By the time a corporate committee approves a piece of content capitalizing on a current trend, that trend has been dead for 2 weeks, and posting it makes the brand look woefully out of touch. Agile brands are building internal media engines that function more like a daily newsroom than an advertising agency. They empower frontline content creators to script, shoot, edit, and publish within a 24-hour window. They rely on post-publication analytics to dictate the strategy, rather than pre-publication guesswork. If a video performs poorly, they do not hold a post-mortem meeting. They simply analyze the retention graph, identify the exact second viewers dropped off, and test a different hook the very next day. This high-frequency testing methodology is the only way to map the specific interest graph of your target demographic. You must treat your social channels as real-time focus groups. When you publish a video discussing the environmental impact of your supply chain and it tanks, but a video showing a behind-the-scenes mistake in your warehouse goes viral, the market is giving you pure, unfiltered data about what actually resonates with them. The mistake brands make is trying to force the market to care about their internal corporate priorities. The successful strategy is to completely surrender to the data, identify the specific intersections between what the brand can authentically discuss and what the audience actively wants to consume, and relentlessly exploit those intersections to build immense brand affinity. But capturing attention is only the first half of the equation. A massive influx of viral views means absolutely nothing if that attention dissipates into the digital ether without driving tangible business outcomes. Countless brands have experienced the sugar rush of a viral hit, accumulating millions of views, only to look at their sales dashboard the next morning and see absolutely zero movement. This happens because they engineered the content for algorithmic distribution but completely failed to engineer the content for psychological conversion. They built the massive superhighway, but they completely forgot to build the off-ramp leading directly to their storefront. How do you bridge that massive gap between a transient viewer being mildly entertained and a potential customer actively desiring your product? How do you take the raw, chaotic energy of algorithmic attention and systematically funnel it into predictable, measurable revenue without triggering the consumer's deep-seated aversion to being sold to? That specific psychological transition, the exact mechanism of turning a fleeting view into a lifelong customer, is a delicate science, and the precise framework for achieving it is exactly what we must unpack next. To understand this transition, we must fundamentally redefine what a conversion mechanism looks like in 2026. The traditional call to action, explicitly instructing viewers to click the link in the bio and use a promotional discount code, is now a massive negative signal to the modern American consumer. As soon as you overtly ask for the sale in the first 30 seconds of a video, you instantly trigger what behavioral psychologists refer to as psychological reactance. The viewer instinctively feels their autonomy is being threatened by a high-pressure sales tactic, their internal advertisement blocker activates, and they instantly scroll away. This rapid abandonment absolutely decimates your algorithmic distribution. Instead, the most sophisticated and highly profitable brands operating in the United States today are utilizing a deeply integrated framework we call the value-first conversion loop. This strategy completely masks the sales pitch within an overwhelming, undeniable amount of free, hyper-specific educational value. Let us examine a practical application using a hypothetical scenario. Imagine if Michael is the founder of a direct-to-consumer brand manufacturing premium, ergonomically designed office furniture headquartered in Austin, Texas. Historically, in previous decades, Michael might have run standard advertisements highlighting the high-density foam lumbar support and aggressively offering a 20% off summer sale. That strategy is currently yielding severely diminishing returns due to total ad fatigue and the rising costs of paid media distribution. Instead, Michael adopts the value-first conversion loop to systematically capture organic market share. He begins at the top of the funnel. Michael creates a highly engaging short-form video. He does not show his proprietary chair. He does not mention his company name or his website. The hook is entirely focused on a universal visceral pain point. He starts by physically demonstrating the exact seated posture that causes chronic lower back pain for millions of Americans who have transitioned to permanent remote work environments. He utilizes detailed anatomical models to show exactly how the L4 and L5 vertebrae compress when a person sits on a standard dining room chair for 8 consecutive hours a day. This video achieves massive algorithmic reach because the problem is universally understood, and the visual demonstration is highly compelling. It is immensely shareable. People immediately send it to their corporate coworkers and spouses who constantly complain about back pain. Now, Michael has successfully captured the attention of millions of potential consumers who have self-identified as back pain sufferers simply by watching the video to completion. The next critical phase is building the educational bridge. In his subsequent videos, which the platform algorithms will naturally begin to serve to the specific individuals who watched the initial hook all the way through, Michael goes significantly deeper into the subject matter. He provides actionable, entirely free advice that yields immediate physical relief. He demonstrates 3 specific kinetic stretches designed to decompress the lower spine. He clearly explains the exact mathematical formula for calculating ideal computer monitor height based on the user's specific physical stature. He gives away such a massive volume of highly valuable, immediately actionable information that the viewer fundamentally shifts their perception. They begin to view Michael not as a corporate salesman trying to extract their capital, but as a trusted physical wellness authority, deeply invested in solving their pain. This dynamic establishes intense parasocial trust, which is the most valuable currency in the modern digital economy. Only after establishing this massive reservoir of goodwill does Michael introduce the actual physical product, and he executes this introduction almost invisibly. In a comprehensive video discussing how to completely optimize a home workspace for maximum daily energy, he simply happens to be sitting in his company's flagship chair. He casually mentions how a specific, highly engineered tilt mechanism, which just happens to be the exact mechanism patented by his brand, is the only way he personally survives his grueling 12-hour workdays. He absolutely does not tell the audience to buy this chair. He simply frames the product as the logical, ultimate, and scientifically sound solution to the exact physiological problem he has just spent weeks meticulously educating the audience about. The viewer, already entirely primed by the sequential educational content and completely trusting Michael's established expertise, takes the initiative. They actively seek out the brand. They navigate to his profile, they locate the corporate website independently, and they gladly purchase the product at full retail price because they are no longer buying a piece of discounted furniture. They are investing in a definitive solution to their daily suffering. Historical trends analyzed extensively from 2024 through early 2026 clearly demonstrate that this invisible, narrative-driven product integration drastically lowers customer acquisition costs, while simultaneously driving a massive increase in average order value. When consumers feel they have actively discovered the product themselves through their own educational research, rather than having it aggressively pushed onto them via an interruptive advertisement, their lifetime value to the brand absolutely skyrockets. They become brand evangelists rather than mere transaction nodes. Implementing this precise framework requires a highly disciplined and rigidly structured content architecture. You must mathematically map out your content publication schedule in a strict 1:3 ratio. For every single piece of content that even subtly features your core product or service, you must strategically publish 3 robust pieces of content dedicated entirely to solving your target demographic's tangential problems for absolutely zero cost. This is the universal law of reciprocity fully digitized and weaponized for corporate growth. If you are operating a financial technology software company, you do not post boring screen-recorded tutorials detailing how your user interface works. Nobody cares about your interface. Instead, you post detailed, highly researched, and engaging breakdowns of how current macroeconomic inflation trends are directly impacting middle-class American retirement savings accounts. You break down highly complex corporate tax code changes in plain, highly accessible language. You purposefully position your brand as the definitive, indispensable resource for financial literacy first, and a software provider second. Think deeply about the specific friction points that exist in your ideal customer's daily life. The perfect social media strategy does not interrupt their digital scroll to aggressively talk about your brand. It seamlessly and naturally enters their digital scroll to talk about them. It deeply validates their specific frustrations. It provides a highly accurate, clinical name for the specific problem they are currently experiencing, but completely lack the vocabulary to articulate. There is a fundamental psychological rule in modern marketing. When you can describe a consumer's problem better and more accurately than they can describe it themselves, they will automatically and subconsciously assume that you also hold the definitive solution to that problem. This psychological principle is the absolute bedrock of modern organic conversion. Let us look at another powerful example to solidify this concept. Imagine if Emily, running a highly specialized logistics software startup in Chicago, realizes her most profitable target audience consists of highly stressed, overworked corporate supply chain managers. Instead of creating generic corporate content detailing her software's seamless application programming interface integrations, she launches a daily video series analyzing real-time global shipping port bottlenecks. She utilizes complex, publicly available maritime data to accurately predict localized supply shortages weeks before they are ever reported on mainstream television news networks. She provides raw, unfiltered market intelligence. Very quickly, she becomes an indispensable mandatory daily watch for logistics executives across the United States. When those stressed executives inevitably realize that their outdated legacy software systems cannot possibly handle the intense complexities that Emily discusses every single day, they will not waste their time searching generic search engines for alternative software vendors. They will go directly to Emily's company because she has already proven her absolute mastery of their specific domain. This value-first architecture effectively and consistently bypasses the conscious, deeply ingrained sales resistance of the modern American consumer. However, attempting to execute this highly sophisticated strategy at massive scale, across multiple disparate social media platforms simultaneously, requires a completely new structural approach to internal content production. You absolutely cannot sustain this immense volume and deep intellectual rigor using traditional, linear corporate production methods. You need to engineer a system that allows a single highly researched core idea to be efficiently atomized into dozens of unique, platform-native digital assets without ever losing the core narrative thread or the educational value. If you fail to build this specific operational backend, your internal creative team will experience severe burnout within a single month, and your entire strategy will inevitably collapse under its own operational weight. The structural blueprint for building this unstoppable, highly efficient internal content engine that scales this exact psychological framework across every single digital touchpoint is the critical operational missing link, and exactly how you construct that assembly line from scratch without sacrificing content quality is what we will dissect right now. To build this internal content engine, you must completely abandon the traditional advertising agency model where a single marketing asset takes a month to conceptualize, produce, and approve. The modern framework is built entirely on the concept of content atomization. This is the precise mechanical methodology of taking a single highly dense, deeply researched macro piece of content and systematically fracturing it into dozens of native, highly optimized micro assets across every relevant digital platform. This is not a creative philosophy. It is a rigid operational assembly line designed to mathematically maximize output while minimizing production friction. The foundation of this system is the macro content pillar. This is absolutely not a 30-second corporate commercial or a heavily scripted product launch video. This is a robust 30 to 60-minute unscripted recording. It could be an internal podcast episode, a deeply researched video essay, a recorded consultation, or a comprehensive industry panel discussion. This macro piece must contain the absolute highest concentration of your brand's proprietary knowledge, industry insights, and unique value propositions. The goal of this recording session is not to create a perfect, polished final product, but to capture raw, authentic intellectual capital flowing directly from the leading experts within your American corporation. Once the macro pillar is recorded, it enters the atomization assembly line. This is where historical trends from the past 3 years show the greatest divergence between successful brands and those destined for digital obscurity in 2026. The successful brands have built internal teams consisting not of traditional marketers, but of platform-native cultural translators. A single hour of high-quality macro video is handed off to a specialized short-form video editor. This editor does not just arbitrarily cut the video into random 60-second clips. They specifically hunt for the most visceral, counterintuitive, or highly educational statements made during that hour. They are looking for the exact moments where the subject matter expert delivers a profound insight that challenges conventional industry wisdom. Imagine if David, the chief marketing officer of a mid-sized agricultural technology startup based in Des Moines, Iowa, spends $5,000 in 3 weeks producing a single highly polished corporate video about their new soil sensor. He posts it once across his corporate social channels, it gets 300 organic views, and the financial investment is completely lost in the algorithmic void. Now, imagine if David instead implements the atomization framework. He sits down his lead agronomist and his chief technology officer for a deeply unscripted, highly technical 45-minute recorded conversation about the devastating, hidden financial impact of topsoil erosion on Midwestern corn yields. That single, inexpensive conversation becomes the macro pillar. David's internal atomization team then goes to work. They extract 15 distinct, high-impact short-form videos. One video focuses entirely on the surprising financial cost of nitrogen runoff. Another focuses on a controversial prediction about agricultural water rights in the year 2026. Another breaks down a very specific, actionable soil testing methodology. These 15 videos are then meticulously formatted with high-retention visual editing and distributed across various short-form platforms over a 2-week period. Simultaneously, the audio from the macro pillar is leveled, polished, and published as an audio podcast. The raw transcript is fed to a technical copywriter who distills the conversation into a deeply insightful, 4,000-word email newsletter sent directly to farming cooperative executives. Furthermore, the core statistics cited during the conversation are transformed into highly shareable text-based posts for professional networking platforms. From a single 45-minute recording session, David has successfully generated nearly 30 unique, platform-native pieces of content. The production cost per individual asset drops to near zero, while the sheer volume of high-quality, value-first touchpoints increases exponentially. This is the only mathematical way to achieve true omnipresence in the modern digital ecosystem without bankrupting your corporate marketing department. To execute this effectively, the internal team structure must be radically redefined. The era of the bloated corporate marketing department with 4 layers of middle management approval is completely over. You need to build a lean, highly autonomous pod structure. This pod consists of 3 critical specialized roles. First, the subject matter expert, who provides the raw intellectual capital, the deep industry experience, and the authoritative on-camera presence. Second, the content architect, who designs the macro pillar topics based strictly on current search trends, algorithmic data, and proven audience friction points. Third, the platform native editor, a hyper-agile creative who intuitively understands the distinct pacing, visual language, caption styling, and algorithmic nuances of each individual social platform. When you operate a traditional marketing department, a piece of content must pass through a brand manager, a legal compliance reviewer, and a creative director. This archaic process inherently strips away any edge, urgency, or cultural relevance the content might have possessed. The atomized pod structure operates on deep trust and predetermined conceptual guardrails. The subject matter expert speaks freely within their specific domain of expertise. The platform native editor has total creative autonomy to package that expertise into the most engaging formats possible, without waiting for a committee to approve a specific text overlay or a rapid pacing decision. This high-velocity workflow is exactly how digitally native, independent brands in the United States are currently outmaneuvering legacy corporations with advertising budgets 50 times their size. Industry observations throughout late 2025 and early 2026 clearly indicate that organic algorithmic reach strictly favors high-frequency publishing. The algorithms demand a constant, uninterrupted stream of novel data to accurately map the highly complex interest graph of their users. If you are only publishing one highly polished video per week, you are literally starving the algorithm of the data points it desperately needs to figure out who actually wants to watch your content. By implementing the atomization assembly line, you are effectively feeding the machine a constant diet of high-quality behavioral data. You are giving the algorithm 30 distinct chances per week to find your ideal customer instead of just one. Consider the potential outcomes for a regional commercial real estate brokerage in Atlanta, Georgia. If they attempt to compete by producing standard, repetitive property tour videos, they are competing in an ultra-saturated, highly commoditized market where their content is indistinguishable from thousands of other agents. However, if they film a weekly, one-hour internal strategy meeting analyzing macroeconomic interest rate trends, obscure zoning law changes, and massive demographic shifts in the metropolitan Atlanta area, they have created a profoundly valuable macro pillar. Their atomization pod then turns that strategic meeting into dozens of highly specific micro-assets discussing commercial lease negotiation tactics, hidden tax incentives, and structural building costs. They instantly elevate themselves from being perceived as basic real estate agents to being recognized as elite, institutional-grade market analysts. This profound shift in brand perception is the direct, measurable result of operationalizing your content production. You are transitioning from a reactive media consumer to a proactive media publisher. But having the operational capacity to publish 30 pieces of content a week is completely useless if the first 3 seconds of every single video fails to capture the human eye. We have built the engine and we have established the supply chain, but none of it matters if the initial point of contact is fundamentally broken. The exact science of the visual hook, the psychological triggers that force a user to stop scrolling, and the specific frameworks for engineering those first crucial seconds to manipulate human curiosity is the single most important variable in this entire system, and that is exactly what we are going to master next. The human brain operating in the digital landscape of 2026 is fundamentally different from the consumer brain of a decade ago. It has been relentlessly conditioned by algorithmic feeds to become the most ruthless and highly efficient content filtering mechanism in human history. When an American consumer opens a social media application, they are not actively looking for your brand. They are seeking a chemical dopamine release, and they are scanning the digital environment at lightning speed to find it. Industry analysts used to say you had 3 seconds to capture attention. Current historical trends and extensive platform data explicitly show that this 3-second rule is a dangerously outdated myth. You do not have 3 seconds. You have approximately 0.7 seconds to interrupt the consumer's subconscious scrolling pattern before their thumb automatically swipes upward and banishes your corporate marketing budget to the digital graveyard. Understanding this brutal biological reality is the absolute foundation of engineering a successful hook. The hook is not merely the introduction to your video. It is a complex psychological trigger designed to force a biological override. You must create what behavioral psychologists call a pattern interrupt. A pattern interrupt occurs when the brain is presented with visual or auditory stimuli that deeply contradict its established expectations, forcing it to pause its automatic behavior to process the new, conflicting information. If your brand content begins with a slow fade-in of your corporate logo, a polite greeting, or a static shot of a spokesperson standing in front of a white wall, you are flawlessly matching the established pattern of a traditional, highly skippable advertisement. The brain recognizes this pattern instantly, labels it as a non-threat and non-entertainment, and discards it without a second thought. To engineer a true pattern interrupt, we must utilize a specific 3-pillar hook framework. The first pillar is visual dissonance. You must present an image in the first frame that simply does not make logical sense in the context of a standard corporate video. Imagine if Robert, the marketing director for a national chain of high-end fitness centers based in Miami, Florida, is launching a new campaign about metabolic health. The traditional approach would be to start with a wide cinematic shot of a beautiful empty gym floor. The visual dissonance approach is radically different. The very first frame opens tightly on Robert standing in a dimly lit grocery store aisle, physically holding an entire block of pure refined sugar in one hand and a seemingly healthy, organically branded granola bar in the other. He drops the block of sugar onto the floor where it shatters. This action happens before a single word is spoken. The viewer's brain cannot immediately process why a fitness professional is dropping raw sugar in a supermarket, and that sheer cognitive confusion forces them to stop scrolling. The second pillar of the framework is the auditory spike. The first words spoken must be entirely devoid of corporate jargon, pleasantries, or introductions. You do not state your name and you do not state your company. You immediately deliver a highly charged, definitive statement that fundamentally challenges a deeply held belief or articulates a specific, painful reality. Using our previous example, as the sugar shatters on the floor, Robert does not say "Welcome to our new fitness series." He looks directly into the lens and says the health food industry in the United States has been legally lying to you since 1994, and this exact granola bar is the reason your metabolism is completely broken. This auditory spike instantly filters the audience. It immediately alienates anyone who does not care about fitness, which is precisely what you want to teach the algorithm who not to serve the video to, while simultaneously sinking a massive psychological hook into anyone who has ever struggled with weight loss or diet confusion. The third and most critical pillar is the cultivation of the curiosity gap. The curiosity gap is the cognitive space between what the viewer currently knows and what they urgently feel they need to know based on the information you just presented. A perfectly engineered hook opens a massive loop in the viewer's mind that can only be successfully closed by watching the remainder of the video. When Robert states that a specific, healthy-looking product is destroying the viewer's metabolism, he has created a massive curiosity gap. The viewer is fundamentally compelled to watch the rest of the content to discover the scientific justification for this bold claim, to learn what the specific ingredient is, and ultimately, to discover the solution to the problem. The brain absolutely despises unresolved cognitive loops, and it will endure minutes of educational content simply to achieve the psychological closure of resolving that initial question. Historical trends regarding video performance across major platforms consistently demonstrate that hooks relying on negative framing or the avoidance of critical mistakes perform exponentially better than hooks utilizing purely positive framing. This is deeply rooted in evolutionary psychology. Human beings are biologically hardwired to prioritize the avoidance of danger over the acquisition of a potential benefit. This phenomenon, known as loss aversion, is a profoundly powerful tool for American brands when deployed ethically and educationally. Let us apply this loss aversion framework to a complex business-to-business scenario. Imagine if Sarah is the lead consultant for a boutique corporate tax advisory firm in New York City. Her target demographic consists of high-net-worth real estate developers. A purely positive hook would sound something like "Learn how to maximize your real estate tax deductions this year." This is highly generic, easily ignorable, and completely lacks urgency. However, if Sarah utilizes the loss aversion framework, her hook fundamentally transforms. She begins her video by standing in front of a whiteboard filled with complex, heavily redacted tax documents and forcefully states if you own commercial multifamily real estate in 2026, and you are still utilizing straight-line depreciation, you are actively forfeiting millions of dollars directly back to the federal government every single quarter. This formulation fundamentally alters the viewer's psychological state. It takes a dry, complex financial topic and injects it with massive immediate urgency. It leverages the inherent fear of financial loss and the profound dread of making a costly, unforced error. The viewer is no longer watching a video about tax strategy. They are watching a video to urgently confirm whether or not they are currently bleeding massive amounts of capital. By masterfully combining visual dissonance, an aggressive auditory spike, and a powerful curiosity gap rooted in loss aversion, Sarah successfully bypasses the cognitive defenses of highly skeptical, time-poor executives, forcing them to grant her their undivided attention. You have now successfully engineered a visual and auditory mechanism that reliably halts the scroll and captures the initial fraction of a second required to begin your brand narrative. You have utilized deep human psychology to force the viewer to look at you. However, this attention is not permanently acquired. It is a highly volatile, strictly temporary loan. The platform algorithm is monitoring the exact microsecond the viewer inevitably decides to swipe away. If you successfully execute a brilliant hook but immediately transition back into slow, methodical corporate pacing, the viewer will feel profoundly manipulated and instantly abandon the video. This immediate abandonment after a strong hook sends an apocalyptic signal to the algorithm, indicating that your content is clickbait that completely fails to deliver on its initial premise. The punishment for this is severe algorithmic suppression. Securing the first 3 seconds is merely the entry fee to the arena. The true test of a perfectly optimized content strategy is what happens in the critical window between second 4 and second 15. This is where the battle for average view duration is truly won or lost, and mastering the intricate mechanics of narrative micro-pacing to sustain that borrowed attention is the exact framework we must deconstruct next. The transition from the hook to the meat of your content is the precise moment where most American brand strategies fundamentally fail. In the industry, we call this the retention valley of death. This refers to the specific 4 to 15-second window where a viewer who was initially intrigued by your high-stakes hook realizes they are actually watching a corporate video and begins to look for a reason to swipe away. If you spend this time introducing yourself, stating your company mission, or displaying a transition screen with slow-moving graphics, you have already lost. In 2026, the only way to navigate this valley is through a relentless application of narrative micro-pacing. This is not about talking fast. It is about the information density per second and the strategic use of visual and conceptual pattern shifts. To sustain attention, you must implement the open-loop bridge. This is a structural technique where you take the massive curiosity gap created in your hook, and instead of closing it immediately, you layer a series of smaller, secondary questions on top of it. This creates a psychological compounding effect. Imagine if Marcus, the founder of a high-growth cybersecurity firm in Silicon Valley, uses a hook about a massive, undocumented data breach affecting major U.S. retail banks. In the 5th second, Marcus does not explain the breach. Instead, he says, "But before we look at the specific lines of code that let the hackers in, you have to understand why the current firewall standard used by 98% of Fortune 500 companies is fundamentally flawed at its core." Marcus has just opened a second loop. The viewer now needs to know about the breach and the flaw in the firewall. By the 10th second, he adds a third layer. And curiously, the person who discovered this flaw was not a security researcher, but a 15-year-old gamer in Ohio. By stacking these narrative loops, Marcus has transformed a single point of interest into a complex, multi-threaded story that the viewer feels biologically compelled to finish. Historical trends in audience retention mapping show that for every additional open loop you successfully plant in the first 15 seconds, you exponentially increase the probability of that viewer reaching the midpoint of your video. This is the difference between a video that gets a few thousand views and a video that achieves massive, viral distribution across the entire United States. The algorithm sees that people are staying locked in through the initial drop-off period and concludes that the content is of exceptionally high quality, pushing it to an even broader audience. However, narrative loops alone are insufficient if the visual presentation remains static. We must discuss the mechanical implementation of visual rhythm. For American brands, there is often a fear that fast-paced editing looks unprofessional or juvenile. This is a catastrophic misunderstanding of modern media consumption. Professionalism in 2026 is defined by how much you respect the viewer's time. If you keep a single camera angle for more than 5 seconds, you are signaling to the viewer's brain that the information flow has slowed down. To combat this, your internal atomization team must utilize the rule of 3 for visual shifts. Every 3 to 5 seconds, there must be a change in the frame. This does not mean random jump cuts. It means a transition from a talking head to a relevant piece of B-roll, a sudden zoom in to emphasize a specific point, or the appearance of a clear high-contrast text overlay that mirrors the exact word being spoken. Consider a case study of a major automotive parts manufacturer in Detroit. Historically, they would post 3-minute videos of a technician slowly explaining a brake pad installation. The retention was abysmal. When they pivoted to a micro-pace strategy, they transformed the same information. Now, while the technician speaks, the camera cuts to a high-speed macro shot of the brake pad friction material, followed by a digital schematic overlay showing heat dissipation, followed by a rapid comparison shot of a worn-out competitor part. The information being delivered is the same, but the visual rhythm is so high that the viewer never has a chance to look for the exit. The brain is kept in a state of constant, mild novelty, which suppresses the urge to swipe. Another critical element of narrative micro-pacing is the elimination of verbal fluff. This requires a brutal, uncompromising approach to the editing process. Every well, so, and, or but that does not strictly advance the narrative must be removed. In 2026, the American digital audience has been conditioned to expect information in its most concentrated form. If a sentence can be 5 words instead of 10, it must be 5 words. This creates a sensation of propulsive momentum. The viewer feels as though they are being pulled through the content by an invisible force. If you listen to the most successful creators in the United States today, they speak in short, punchy declarative sentences. They avoid the passive voice. They do not say a study was conducted by our team that suggests, they say our data shows. This directness builds authority and keeps the pacing tight. Let us look at a hypothetical scenario involving a luxury skincare brand based in Los Angeles. Imagine the brand manager, Jennifer, is overseeing a campaign for a new vitamin C serum. In the past, she might have approved a script where the spokesperson spends 30 seconds talking about the brand's commitment to quality and natural ingredients. In 2026, Jennifer ensures the script hits the ground running. By second 6, the video has already shown a microscope shot of skin cells and mentioned the exact pH level required for product stability. The pacing is so dense with technical, valuable information that the viewer feels they are getting an education for free. This high information density acts as a psychological anchor. Even if the viewer is not a skincare expert, the sheer volume of specific, authoritative data points creates a sense of trust. They feel that if the brand is this meticulous about the information they share, they must be equally meticulous about the products they create. This leads us to the concept of the information payoff. To maintain high retention, you cannot simply keep opening loops forever. You must provide a series of small wins throughout the video. For every major question you raise, you must resolve a smaller secondary point within 60 seconds. This provides the viewer with a sense of progress. If you keep them in a state of total confusion for too long, they will become frustrated and leave. The perfect strategy is a constant cycle of tension and release. You identify a problem, provide a micro-solution, then immediately identify a larger, more complex problem that the micro-solution uncovered. This mechanical approach to storytelling and visual rhythm is what allows a brand to dominate the interest graph. You are not just competing against other brands. You are competing against every entertainer, news outlet, and influencer on the platform. To win, your content must be as well engineered as a Hollywood thriller but as informative as a doctoral thesis. You must master the art of being relentlessly interesting while remaining deeply educational. But even if you master micro-pacing and visual rhythm, there is a hidden variable that can still sabotage your entire strategy. You can have the best hook, the tightest editing, and the most valuable information, but if you do not understand how to communicate directly with the hidden architecture of the platform itself, your content will still fail to reach its full potential. There is a specific language of metadata, engagement signals, and algorithmic feedback loops that sits beneath the surface of every video. Most brands treat this as an afterthought, but in reality, it is the fundamental bridge between your creative work and the millions of American consumers you are trying to reach. The precise methodology for optimizing this invisible layer to ensure the algorithm works for you instead of against you is a specialized discipline that requires a total shift in how you view the concept of the upload, and that hidden technical playbook is exactly what we are going to dive into next. The hidden technical playbook of 2026 begins with a total rejection of the idea that an upload is a static event. For a professional American brand, the moment you hit publish is not the end of the process. It is the beginning of a high-speed data acquisition phase that determines the ultimate trajectory of your content. Most marketing teams in the United States spend weeks on a video and then spend 30 seconds writing a title and choosing a thumbnail. This is a fundamental operational error. In the current interest graph economy, your metadata and your visual packaging are the only tools the algorithm has to categorize your content and find its initial testing audience. If you misclassify your video through poor metadata, the algorithm will serve it to the wrong group of people, they will inevitably skip it, and your retention metrics will crash before the video even has a chance to breathe. To master this invisible layer, we must first look at the science of the click-through rate, or CTR. Historically, brands believed that a high CTR was solely about being flashy or using bright colors. In 2026, the American consumer is hyper-aware of clickbait and has developed a physiological aversion to anything that looks like a low-quality lure. Successful brands now utilize a concept called cognitive continuity. This means the thumbnail, the title, and the first 3 seconds of the video must form a seamless, unbroken psychological chain. Imagine if Tyler, the head of marketing for a renewable energy startup in Colorado, creates a thumbnail featuring a high-contrast image of a revolutionary new home battery system, with a title that reads "Why the American Power Grid is Failing in 2026." If the video starts with Tyler sitting in an office saying, "Hello everyone, today I want to talk about energy," he has broken cognitive continuity. The viewer clicked for a high-stakes investigation into the grid, but they were greeted with a corporate greeting. The result is an immediate exit. Instead, Tyler must ensure the very first frame of the video is a visual match to the thumbnail, and the very first sentence spoken is a direct escalation of the title. This technical alignment signals to the algorithm that the content is highly relevant to the users who clicked, which in turn increases the confidence score the system assigns to your video. High confidence scores lead to broader distribution beyond your core followers and into the lucrative browse features where true viral growth happens. Historical trends suggest that videos with high cognitive continuity maintain a 10 to 15% higher retention rate in the first 30 seconds than those that do not. Next, we must address the evolution of keywords and semantic indexing. The algorithms of 2026 no longer rely on simple tag clouds. They are utilizing advanced natural language processing to listen to every single word spoken in your video. This means your script itself is your primary metadata. If you are a brand specialized in sustainable fashion, the algorithm is scanning your audio for semantically related terms like circular economy, textile waste, organic cotton, and supply chain transparency. If you fill your script with generic corporate speak and vague adjectives, the algorithm struggles to place you. However, if you are highly specific and use the technical vocabulary of your niche, you are essentially providing a high-definition map for the algorithm to follow. Consider a case study of a specialized medical software company based in Boston. By intentionally seeding their scripts with specific industry terminology and addressing current regulatory shifts in United States healthcare law, they saw their content being recommended alongside major medical journals and high-level educational creators. They did not need to spend $1 on search engine optimization services because they built the optimization directly into the speech patterns of their subject matter experts. This is the level of technical intentionality required for an American brand to thrive today. You are speaking to two audiences simultaneously, the human viewer and the algorithmic indexer. Another critical, often ignored element of the technical playbook is the engagement velocity. The first 2 hours of an upload are the most critical window for data collection. Many brands post their content and then go silent. This is a missed opportunity to manipulate the algorithm's perception of your community health. When a viewer leaves a comment, especially one that asks a complex or insightful question, your brand must respond immediately. But not with a generic "thank you." You must respond with a comment that encourages further dialogue. In 2026, the depth of a comment thread is a high-weight signal for the algorithm. A video with 10 comments that are each 5 sentences long is viewed as significantly more valuable than a video with 100 comments that just say "great video." Imagine if Maria, running a national chain of specialty coffee roasters, posts a video about the chemistry of water temperature in espresso extraction. A viewer asks a technical question about mineral content. Maria's team should respond with a detailed explanation that prompts a follow-up question. This creates a micro-community within the comments section. The algorithm sees this sustained, high-quality interaction and concludes that the content is fostering deep platform engagement. This triggers a secondary push, often moving the video from the initial test group to a much larger, more diverse audience. Furthermore, we must discuss the strategic use of platform features like chapters and closed captions. In 2026, these are not just accessibility features, they are critical data points. By manually tagging your chapters with high-value descriptive titles, you are creating multiple entry points for search. A viewer might not search for your brand, but they might search for the specific solution mentioned in Chapter 4. Similarly, manually uploading your own closed captions instead of relying on auto-generated ones ensures that the semantic indexing is 100% accurate. It prevents the algorithm from mishearing a technical brand name or a specific industry term, which could lead to your content being miscategorized. The final technical component is the analysis of the outlier. Most brands look at their average performance and try to slowly improve it. The professional scriptwriter looks only at the outliers. If one video out of 50 achieved 5 times the normal reach, you must perform a forensic audit on its technical metadata. Was the title structured as a question or a definitive statement? Did the thumbnail utilize a specific color palette that contrasted with the platform's native interface? Did the video experience a sudden surge in shares on a specific external site like a professional forum or a news aggregator? By identifying the technical DNA of your outliers, you can begin to manufacture success rather than hoping for it. We have now covered the operational engine, the psychological hooks, the narrative pacing, and the invisible technical architecture that powers a viral American brand. You have the blueprint for capturing and holding the attention of millions. But there is one final, overarching challenge that even the most technically perfect brands struggle with. It is the problem of longevity. How do you maintain this level of intensity and relevance month after month without causing audience fatigue? How do you prevent your brand from becoming a one-hit wonder in the hyper-fast cycle of internet trends? There is a specific method for evolving your brand's digital identity so that it grows with your audience rather than being replaced by the next emerging competitor. The secret to building a multi-year content legacy that actually compounds in value over time is the final piece of the puzzle, and it requires a perspective shift that most executives are simply not prepared for. To understand how to stay relevant when everyone else is fading away, you have to look at the one thing the algorithm can never truly replicate. The algorithm can replicate your pacing, your visual style, and even your metadata strategy, but it can never replicate a deeply entrenched community identity. In 2026, American brands that achieve multi-year longevity have shifted their focus from content distribution to community architecture. Most marketing teams treat their audience like a bucket they are trying to fill with views. The masters of the digital landscape treat their audience like a campfire they are trying to keep burning. This is the transition from a transactional relationship to a transformational one. If you want to remain relevant for the next decade, you must stop trying to reach 1 million people and start trying to build a movement of 10,000 true believers who will defend your brand in the comment sections of your competitors. Historical trends indicate that the most successful American brands of the mid-2020s are those that have successfully moved their most engaged followers into private or semi-private digital ecosystems. Think about a high-end outdoor apparel brand based in Seattle. In the old model, they would post a beautiful video of a mountain climber and hope for likes. In the 2026 model, they use that video as a gateway to a specialized community platform where their customers can discuss trail conditions, gear repairs, and conservation efforts in specific national parks. By facilitating these peer-to-peer interactions, the brand moves from being a loud broadcaster to becoming the indispensable infrastructure for a specific lifestyle. When a competitor launches a cheaper jacket with a bigger marketing budget, it doesn't matter, because the competitor hasn't built the social infrastructure that the customer relies on every single day. To achieve this, you must master the art of the inside joke and the shared vocabulary. Every high-retention community has its own language. Imagine if Thomas, the CEO of a specialized home automation software company in Austin, Texas, realizes that his most loyal users all share a specific frustration with a particular legacy hardware standard. Instead of ignoring it, Thomas leans into it. He creates a series of videos mocking the complexity of that old hardware, using specific technical terms that only a true power user would understand. To a general viewer, the video is confusing. To the target customer, it is a profound signal that Thomas is one of them. He is not a suit in a boardroom. He is a fellow enthusiast who shares their pain and their triumphs. This creates a sense of belonging that is psychologically impossible to break through traditional advertising. We must also discuss the role of vulnerability in long-term brand equity. In the early 2020s, corporate transparency was a buzzword. In 2026, it is a survival requirement. American consumers are now hypersensitive to the sanitized, perfect image that corporations try to project. If your brand makes a mistake, your instinct will be to hide it or issue a formal legalistic apology. This is a missed opportunity for massive community growth. Case studies from the last 2 years show that brands that lean into their failures, showing the raw behind-the-scenes process of fixing a supply chain error or admitting that a product feature didn't meet their own high standards, see a significant spike in long-term trust. When you show the human struggle behind the corporate logo, you give the audience something to root for. They are no longer just buying a product. They are supporting a team of people they feel they know. Let us look at a hypothetical scenario involving a regional health insurance provider based in Ohio. Usually, insurance companies are viewed with deep skepticism. Imagine if the marketing director, Susan, decides to launch a series called The Ethics Room. In these videos, she brings the actual claims adjusters on camera to discuss the most difficult, heart-wrenching decisions they had to make that week, explaining the legal and financial constraints they operate under while acknowledging the human cost. This level of radical, almost uncomfortable honesty completely shatters the viewer's preconceived notions of a faceless insurance giant. It builds a level of moral authority that no amount of polished commercial acting could ever replicate. Potential outcomes of this strategy include a drastic reduction in customer churn and a significant increase in organic referrals, as the brand is now perceived as the only honest player in a dishonest industry. This leads us to the concept of the evergreen content vault. To stay relevant without burning out your creative team, you must build a library of content that remains valuable regardless of current trends. While 60% of your output should be high-velocity, trend-responsive content, 40% must be foundational. This is content that answers the fundamental questions of your industry so thoroughly that it becomes the definitive resource. If you are a commercial landscaping company in Phoenix, Arizona, your evergreen vault should include the most detailed guide in existence on soil alkalinity and desert irrigation systems. 5 years from now, when a new homeowner in Scottsdale is struggling with a dying lawn, your video should still be the first thing they find. By consistently layering these evergreen assets beneath your viral high-energy content, you build a foundation of authority that compounds over time. However, even with a strong community and a vault of evergreen content, you will eventually face the plateau. Every brand reaches a point where their initial growth slows down, and their core message begins to feel repetitive. This is where most American brands panic and try to reinvent themselves, often alienating their loyal base in the process. The secret to breaking through the plateau is not total reinvention. It is lateral expansion through collaborative storytelling. You must find the non-competing brands and creators who share your audience's values and integrate their perspectives into your narrative. Imagine if a high-end kitchenware brand based in New York City finds that their growth among home cooks has flattened. Instead of just making more cooking videos, they collaborate with an interior design brand to talk about the psychology of the kitchen as a social space. They collaborate with a sustainable farming collective to talk about the origin of ingredients. By constantly bringing new, high-value perspectives into their ecosystem, they keep the content fresh without ever losing their core identity. They are not changing who they are. They are expanding the world that their brand inhabits. This brings us to the most difficult aspect of longevity, the transition from the founder-led brand to the institution-led brand. Many of the most successful social strategies in 2026 are built around a single charismatic personality. But what happens when that person wants to step back? To build a brand that outlasts any single individual, you must systematize your brand's personality. You must create a set of storytelling principles and a specific tone of voice that can be inhabited by any member of your team. You are building a character, not a person. We have explored the mechanics of attention, the psychology of conversion, and the architecture of community. You now have the full spectrum of tools required to build a dominant digital presence in the United States. But there is a massive trap waiting for you. It is the trap of the data-driven delusion. It is the moment when you become so focused on the metrics, the algorithms, and the retention graphs that you lose sight of the one thing that actually makes a human being reach for their credit card. There is a specific, irrational, and deeply emotional element of the human experience that the data will never show you. If you ignore this element, your strategy will be a perfect machine with no soul. And in the high-stakes environment of 2026, a brand without a soul is a brand with a fast-approaching expiration date. The final, most important lesson is how to find and protect that soul while still feeding the algorithmic beast, and that is exactly where we are going to finish. The one thing the data will never show you is the exact moment a human being decides to believe in your brand. You can track every click, every millisecond of watch time, and every scroll depth, but these are just the physical symptoms of an underlying emotional event. In 2026, the data-driven delusion is the most common cause of brand stagnation in the United States. Many corporate marketing teams have become so obsessed with pleasing the algorithmic beast that they have optimized away their humanity. They have created content that is technically perfect but emotionally hollow. To protect the soul of your brand, you must understand the difference between attention and affinity. Attention is what you get when you optimize for the algorithm. Affinity is what you get when you optimize for the human. Affinity is built through the strategic use of narrative vulnerability and the willingness to take a stand on non-commercial issues that matter to your core demographic. Imagine if Liam, the owner of a sustainable construction company in Portland, Oregon, looks at his analytics and sees that his technical videos on heat pump efficiency are performing decently. A data-only approach would tell Liam to double down on heat pump content. But Liam understands that he is not just selling HVAC systems. He is selling a vision of a more resilient, localized American future. He decides to produce a raw, handheld video discussing the emotional toll of seeing the historic timber industry in his hometown decline, and why he believes green construction is the only way to save the local economy. This video might have a lower initial click-through rate than a technical tutorial, But the level of deep, emotional affinity it builds with his local customers is immeasurable. They are no longer just hiring a contractor. They are joining Liam in his mission to save their town. Historical trends throughout the mid-2020s show that American consumers are increasingly making purchasing decisions based on the perceived character of the organization. This is not about vague corporate social responsibility statements buried on a website. This is about the visceral human personality that comes through in your daily content. If your brand feels like it was written by a legal department, it will be treated with the same cold indifference as a tax form. If it feels like it was created by a person with specific values, flaws, and a sense of humor, it will be treated like a friend. This is the secret to protecting the soul of your brand. You must allow the people behind the logo to be seen. Let us look at a case study of a high-end kitchen appliance manufacturer based in Chicago. Their data suggested that viewers wanted more recipes. They spent 6 months producing high-gloss cooking segments that achieved millions of views, but led to zero increase in brand sentiment or direct sales. When they analyzed why, they realized they were just another voice in a crowded room of cooking content. They pivoted. They started a series called The Engineering Failure Files, where their lead product designer sat at a desk and talked about the 3 prototypes of their famous oven that absolutely failed, explaining the specific technical mistakes they made and how those mistakes cost the company millions. This radical honesty humanized the massive corporation. It showed that they cared more about perfection than about looking perfect. The potential outcomes of this shift were staggering. While the total view count was lower than the recipes, the conversion rate from those videos was 5 times higher. People bought the oven because they now trusted the engineer behind it. To implement this without losing your algorithmic momentum, you must utilize the core and satellite model. Your core content remains the high-velocity, highly optimized educational and entertaining pieces we have discussed throughout this masterclass. These are the videos that feed the algorithm and bring new people into your ecosystem. Your satellite content, however, is where the soul lives. This is where you post the raw, unedited reflections, the behind-the-scenes struggles, and the deep-dive philosophical discussions that define your brand's character. The core content brings them to the door. The satellite content invites them into the kitchen. This requires a difficult conversation with your executive leadership in 2026. Most CEOs are terrified of anything that isn't perfectly polished. You must explain to them that in the current media environment, polish is a signal of deception. The American public has been lied to by polished advertisements for 60 years. They have developed a highly sophisticated immunity to it. What they have zero immunity to is raw, unfiltered reality. When you show the actual office culture, the actual manufacturing defects, and the actual debates happening in your boardroom, you are providing the one thing your competitors are too afraid to give, the truth. Imagine if Sophia, the marketing manager for a regional boutique bank in the Southeast, decides to move away from generic commercials about low interest rates. Instead, she films a weekly roundtable where the bank's loan officers discuss the real-world challenges of small business owners in their community. They talk about the specific reasons why certain businesses fail and others thrive, including the emotional and psychological factors. They aren't selling loans. They are providing a masterclass in local business survival. By doing this, they are building a brand soul that is rooted in the success of their community. When a large, national bank tries to move into their territory with a massive advertising blitz, they find that the local business owners are unshakably loyal to Sophia's bank. The national bank has the data. Sophia has the soul. Protecting the brand soul also means knowing when to ignore the metrics. There will be times when the algorithm demands a specific trend or a specific type of low-quality content that would alienate your core believers. You must have the courage to say no. If you chase every trend, you will eventually become a caricature of yourself. You will lose the very thing that made you unique in the first place. Longevity is built on the foundation of a consistent, recognizable identity that evolves but never betrays its core principles. This brings us to the final, most sophisticated element of a perfect social media strategy: the integration of the feedback loop. Most brands treat their comments and direct messages as a customer service burden. In 2026, these are your primary creative inputs. Your community will tell you exactly what they want to see, what they are confused by, and what they find most valuable. If you listen closely, you don't have to guess what to create next. Your audience will write your content strategy for you. You just have to be humble enough to listen and agile enough to respond. We have now deconstructed the entire architecture of a viral, sustainable American brand. We have covered the algorithmic mechanics, the psychological triggers, the operational assembly lines, and the deep-seated emotional anchors that drive modern commerce. You are now equipped with a framework that is years ahead of the traditional marketing world. But even with all this knowledge, there is one final step that determines whether this remains a theoretical exercise or becomes a dominant market reality. There is a specific way to launch this entire system so that it gains immediate traction and creates its own self-sustaining momentum. If you start wrong, you can spend months fighting uphill against a disinterested algorithm. If you start right, you can trigger a compounding effect that will carry your brand through the next decade. The exact sequence for the first 30 days of your new strategy is the final piece of the puzzle, and it is the only thing standing between you and total digital dominance. The first 30 days of your brand's new content strategy are not about perfection. They are about high-velocity data ingestion. In the year 2026, the algorithms of major social platforms operate on a cold start mechanism. When you shift your content strategy or launch a new channel, the system has zero historical data on who your ideal viewer is. If you post once a week during this initial phase, you are essentially asking the algorithm to solve a billion-piece puzzle with only 4 pieces of information. To trigger the compounding effect, you must implement what we call the 30-day saturation sprint. This is a deliberate, highly structured period of daily publishing, designed to force the algorithm to categorize your brand with surgical precision. During the first 10 days of this sprint, your focus is entirely on broad-spectrum testing. Imagine if Kevin, the founder of a high-growth agricultural drone company in Nebraska, starts his 30-day sprint. In these first 10 days, Kevin does not worry about his brand aesthetic or his long-term narrative. He publishes one high-quality short-form video every single day, each testing a completely different hook and a different angle of his industry. One day he focuses on the physics of drone flight in high winds. The next day he focuses on the economic cost of crop scouting by hand. The third day he shows a raw, unedited clip of a drone crashing during a stress test. By day 10, Kevin has 10 distinct data points. He looks at his analytics and ignores the view counts. Instead, he looks at the audience demographics. If the drone crash video brought in hobbyists but the crop scouting video brought in industrial farm managers, he now knows exactly which visual triggers attract his high-value customers. Days 11 through 20 are the refinement phase. Based on the data from the first 10 days, Kevin identifies the top 3 performing topics and visual styles. He then doubles down on these, but with a critical twist. He begins to introduce the value-first conversion loop we discussed earlier. He moves from broad interest to specific authority. If the crop scouting video was his winner, he spends the next 10 days breaking down the specific datasets those drones collect. He shows how to read a multispectral map. He explains the difference between NDVI and RGB sensors. He is essentially training the algorithm to stop showing his videos to random tech enthusiasts and start showing them exclusively to professional agriculturalists in the Midwest. Historical trends show that brands that pivot their content based on the first 10 days of data see a 40% increase in follower quality and a 50% boost in average view duration by the end of the second week. The final 10 days of the sprint, days 21 through 30, are about establishing the content pillar architecture. This is when Kevin records his first 60-minute macro pillar. Because he has spent 20 days learning exactly what his audience responds to, his macro pillar is not a guess. It is a data-backed masterpiece. He spends an hour discussing the future of autonomous farming with the leading soil scientist. His atomization team then fractures this hour into 30 micro-assets. By the end of day 30, Kevin has transitioned from a struggling content creator to a systematic media powerhouse. He has built a self-sustaining engine that produces more value in a month than his competitors produce in a year. However, the saturation sprint is only effective if you avoid the 3 cardinal sins of the American brand launch. The first sin is the vanity trap. You will be tempted to buy engagement or use artificial growth services to make your channel look established. This is a fatal error in 2026. Modern platforms have highly sophisticated bot detection algorithms that can identify inorganic engagement with near-perfect accuracy. If you pollute your initial data with fake engagement, the algorithm will never be able to find your real audience. You are better off having 100 views from real, interested humans than 100,000 views from a server farm. Potential outcomes of inorganic growth include shadow banning or a permanent suppression of your organic reach. The second sin is the production bottleneck. Many brands fail their 30-day sprint because they try to make every video a cinematic production. You must embrace the low-fidelity aesthetic of 2026. The American public associates high production value with high-pressure sales. A video shot on a modern smartphone with good natural lighting and clear audio often outperforms a studio-produced commercial by a significant margin. The goal is to be perceived as an expert, not a movie studio. If the choice is between posting a polished video every 3 days or a raw, high-value video every day, you must choose the daily output every single time. Frequency is the fuel for the algorithmic engine. The third sin is the engagement vacuum. During your 30-day sprint, you must treat every comment as if it were a direct sales lead. You are not just replying to be polite. You are replying to signal to the algorithm that your content creates high-velocity conversations. If a viewer leaves a thoughtful comment on day 15 and you don't reply until day 20, you have missed the window of peak engagement. You must be in the trenches of your comment section every single hour for the first 30 days. This level of dedication creates a core group of superfans who will become the foundational base for your community architecture. Think about the long-term historical trends we have analyzed. The brands that dominate the American economy are the ones that own the conversation. In the 19th century, it was the brands that owned the railroads. In the 20th century, it was the brands that owned the television airwaves. In 2026, it is the brands that own the interest graph. By following this 10-part masterclass, you are doing more than just improving your social media presence. You are building a modern distribution infrastructure that is immune to the rising costs of traditional advertising. You are becoming your own media company. Imagine if every single employee in your organization understood these principles. Imagine if your sales team was sending you content ideas based on the questions they hear every day. Imagine if your product designers were filming behind-the-scenes footage of their prototypes. When an entire American corporation aligns its internal culture with the realities of modern media consumption, it becomes an unstoppable force. You move beyond being a provider of goods and services and become a central node in the digital life of your customers. This is the end of the theoretical deep dive, but it is the absolute beginning of your operational execution. The digital landscape will continue to shift. The algorithms will change their names, the platforms will rise and fall, and new technologies will emerge. But the fundamental principles of human psychology, narrative pacing, and value-first conversion are timeless. If you remain a student of your audience, if you protect the soul of your brand, and if you never stop feeding the engine of high-velocity output, you will thrive where others fail. The final question you must ask yourself is not whether you have the budget or the team to do this. The question is whether you can afford to stay where you are. Every day that you rely on an outdated marketing playbook is a day that you lose cognitive real estate to a more agile competitor. The tools are in your hands. The data is available. The audience is waiting for someone to finally provide them with real, unvarnished value. You have the blueprint for the perfect social media content strategy for American brands. Now go to your record button, start your 30-day saturation sprint, and show the world exactly what your brand stands for. The journey from a legacy corporation to a digital authority begins with the very next frame you capture. But there is one specific technical setting on your camera that could make or break your first upload's quality.